Hello, I'm Sue Hutchins, and welcome. If this is your first time, a very special welcome to the Iowa Prison Perspectives series. This is sponsored by Living Beyond the Bars of Iowa, the Iowa Justice Action Network, and Iowa of Cure. The goal of these interviews is to inform you, the public, about prison and about loved ones who care about people who are in prison. In Iowa, like in a lot of states, when people talk about prison, we think of rehabilitation. Sometimes we think about people who are watching TV, who are lifting weights, who have a pretty easy life. And the reality of that is not the way it works. Prison is soul crushing and dehumanizing to the people who are in prison. They're not known by their name, they're known by a number. In Iowa, programming has been cut drastically. And some of the programs that were really, really, really helpful to the inmates in the incarcerated and also for the loved ones have been cut drastically. And so my goal in this particular interview and in all of the series is to give you, the public, accurate information about the prison system in Iowa. If you would like to get in touch with me or us, please feel free to do that. We'd love to hear from you. If you agree with what we're saying, if you disagree with what we're saying, if you just want to comment on what we're saying, or if you feel like you are someone or you know someone who ought to be interviewed for this series, please feel free to contact me. I have a Gmail account, and that is Iowa Prison Perspectives, and it's IA Prison Perspectives at gmail.com. Today, we're very, very fortunate to have a professor from the University of Iowa, a music professor, who has had a choir that met with people who were incarcerated in the prison. And also, she was able to take people from outside, from people from the community into the prisons to sing with them and to write music with them and to perform with them. Her name again is Mary Cohen, and I'm going to turn it over to her to let her talk to you about the program, the choir program, Inside Choir, that was at Iowa Medical Facility here in Iowa. So, Mary, it's yours to speak.
Thank you, Sue. I'm looking forward to this conversation, and thank you for all the work you do with Iowa Cure and to really help the general public understand our common humanity. That's what the Oakdale Choir has been about since we started. The grounding framework for this chorus is called Ubuntu, Ubuntu. It's a South African concept that means who I am is how I relate to others, and our interconnectedness is a key part of what we like to reflect on with the choir. Anything that I do is going to impact everybody. Our relationships really impact one another. The Oakdale Choir's goals are to build communities of caring within ourselves, caring among the people that we interact with, our own relationships, and then the much broader sense of caring. The choir started, Sue, in 2009, in February of 2009, and we continued all the way up through early March of 2020 when COVID shut the project down. Summer months, we did songwriting workshops, and during the 11 plus years, we created 150 original songs that were either created solely by incarcerated or inside singers or created collaboratively among inside singers, inside songwriters, or inside and outside songwriters. The choir performed 75 of those songs, and many of them are on the Oakdale Choir website. We would do concerts in the prison for people in the community, and every concert, the folks would always say that it's hearing those original songs, an idea that was started in someone's seed, in someone's heart as an idea, grew into an entire song. And that was a really powerful process to bring the song to life, to rehearse it, arrange it, and perform it for community. We had 174 inside singers and 136 outside singers over those years. One of the inside singers was a woman named Amy Cohen, who has a brand new book coming out this year through Ice Cube Press. Her book is called Inside Voices, and there's a subtitle to it that you can look it up. It's Amy was writing about her experience in the choir, and at the same time, her mother was going through hospice in Iowa City. And so she has this powerful memoir that complements the experience of her caring for her mother at her mother's last days, and then kind of the stress and the challenge of that kind of relationship, and that experience of the end of her mother's life, and going into the prison and having this joyful experience with other people singing together. It's a very interesting back and forth. And here's another interesting story is that Amy's son, Dan Colen, the last name is Kolen. Dan has done a lot. He's a filmmaker in Chicago, and he's done a lot of true crime documentaries. So when his mom joined a choir that went into prison, he was like, "Ooh, is that safe for my mom to go in there?" He was concerned about
Yes.
that
Yeah.
fact. So he came down from Chicago and went to a concert, and that experience of seeing the inside and outside singers performing together just transformed his view and broaden his
Mhm.
awareness of the fact that, hey, we are all human. And there are many, 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 many different ways of thinking about our humanity.
Mhm.
Um, so he got permission to do a collect video footage to create a film. This was in spring of 2015. Dan collected the video footage, and then between 2015 and this year, 2024, it's been a very slow incremental process because all of his other obligations. He created the film called The Inside Singers. The film just came out on the Film Circuit Network this year. It won Best Documentary Short at Cinema on the Bayou Festival, and I traveled there with Arnold Grice and Kenneth Bailey, two former Inside Singers that are featured in the film. Dan has just finished 6 rounds of chemo and is healing well from all of the chemo that is treating his lymphoma. And he wasn't able to attend any of the festivals except for in Chicago. Midwest Film Fest had an event that was just the Q&A. He just was able to come to the Q&A for it.
Mhm.
So, it's been very, very, very interesting to have this opportunity to now have that what happened, Sue, as you may have already said and that you're aware of, the current warden that began in summer of 2020 has decided that the choir cannot restart. I received the message from Warden Heinrichsey on March 31st of 2023, and he said they'd been reviewing what program that they had staffing for, space for, what fit their programming mission, what was sustainable, and they determined that the choir was something they were not able or willing to allow to restart. And so it has been so hard. I have written a grief essay about the experience of a family, of 300 people strong,
Mhm.
and all of the people that have come into the prison to go to concerts, the music making, the singing, the traditions of ending each rehearsal with May You Walk in Beauty, the connectivity that we created through singing together,
Yes.
and now nothing. I've developed other work and other things, but boy, it's been really, really
Such a
difficult.
loss. Such a loss.
Really, really difficult. Really difficult.
Such a loss. Let me ask you before you go on, if somebody wanted to watch that movie that Dan Cohen or documentary that Dan Cohen did, is that possible for them to see that somewhere?
The 3-minute preview is available on Vimeo. The full film is only showing at film festivals now. He's got some work to do before it can be available beyond that. So I think he's hoping that maybe PBS or someone else will pick it up so it will be available broader. There is another video that Iowa Public Television did called Greetings from Iowa, and that if someone just searches for Oakdale Community Choir, Greetings from Iowa, it's about an 8-minute short, and it won a Best Regional Emmy. Tyler
Mhm.
Brinegar from Iowa Public Television created this in November of 2018. So that's a great way to just at least see a little bit of the choir, and the documentary film we hope others will get to see. It's going to be shown the end of June 2024 at the Ramsgate Film Festival in England. So if
Awesome.
anybody happens to be watching that knows someone
England,
in that
England.
part of the world, outside of London.
Yes. And you also mentioned that you had done programs. I think you had done yearly Christmas programs. Am I correct about that?
Well, we
There's
have
been
done
this
25
winter.
different concerts in the prison. So at the end, usually in May and in December. And then in the summer months, we had summer songwriting workshops. So we'd have an informal performance in the summer months. We've also collaborated with an organization in Iowa City that brings folks from across the globe who are learning about promoting social justice through the arts. And so we've had several of those groups come into the prison and participate in kind of a conversation slash concert. We did a special event in November of 2018 called a musical learning exchange with the Soweto
Mhm.
Gospel Choir, Maggie Wheeler and Sarah Thompson, where each person shared out songs that everybody sang together, and I facilitated conversations among people related to the theme, which was changes we choose. So this project is, I mentioned already, building communities of caring. It's also about connecting through proximity. Brian Stevenson makes that argument that, and common sense tells us the same thing. If you want to learn about another culture, another group of people, we need to spend time with that group
Yeah.
of people. So choral singing is one of many different ways, a special way though, a very special way, because when we sing together, we are using our bodies as our instrument. I call that the somatic factor. We are using words, and so the things we sing have some kind of a message. So there's contextual element of what's happening that we can all connect with and learn from different cultures and express. And when those songs are original songs, it gives an even deeper opportunity for us to make that heartfelt proximity connection. One of the things that was one of the most powerful, there's a lot of really cool things about Dan's film, The Inside Singers. One of the things I'll never forget is he's interviewing several of the inside singers, and one gentleman in the interview says, and he tears up, he says he doesn't understand why people in the community want to come in. We go in and volunteer of our time to be with them because the modus operandi in most prisons in the US is, and attitudes are like, you are not worthy, rather than, hey, we all have something important to contribute to our greater good. Every outside singer that goes in, including me, we have learned and grown so much from connecting with people in prison. So that's just a really, really important point to think about how we all grow and learn together. In the
Do you
book that I
see a lot of
published,
talent? Do you see a lot of talent?
there's a lot of skills. I prefer the word skill because music making is something we build and develop.
Okay.
You know, um, I'm not a big fan of the word talent.
Okay. Sorry.
Singing is a learned skill. I'm still learning how to do it myself. We learn through practice, we learn through, and people that have been involved that have never sung before, the success has built a deep sense of self-esteem. I mean, the research that I've done indicates self-esteem when we define it by both worthiness and competence. People feel worthy in that, wow, there are these people here that are coming and being with me. And so there's that deeper feeling of connection and competence in that they feel successful in singing together because, like I said, singing is a learned skill that we can practice and develop. Another outcome has been motivation for future growth. When people are successful, then it's way easier to try new things. And that's what I think what's really sorely missing in Iowa prisons is we don't have the same kind of programming that we used to have. So there is a vital need for all of us on the outside to learn and listen and connect with people on the inside. Last summer, after I got that sad message that the choir couldn't restart, I created songwriting partnerships between incarcerated songwriters and songwriters from all over the US. And there was one in the UK that partnered. And they've created different songs that have been shared out on a Zoom platform with an international group that I host called the International Music and Justice Inquiry Network. Imagine Caring Communities. This is a group that meets on a monthly basis and different folks share out the work that's happening because across the globe there's music making in prisons for with all sorts of positive outcomes for people who are living in prison, for people who are working in prison, and for the broader society and family members of people impacted by prisons. We don't have as much research on the impact of these programs on survivors of crime. Back when we had the choir, we collaborated with the Office of Restorative Justice and Victim Services every concert to find out is there someone who would be interested and willing to come into the concert, and we had several people do that, and we even partnered with some original lyrics created by a survivor of crime, and we put those songs. The song was called Inside a Mother's Heart. We performed it, and that person, she's no longer alive. She graduated to the next realm this year. Elma was her name. She came into the prison to watch the men sing her song, and upon that reflection, it helped her realize that she is more than a victim, and we are more than the worst thing we've ever done.
Yes, yes. It sounds like you have your own personal sadness about having lost the ability to go inside at
That's
Oakdale.
that's so true. Yeah, because I don't
Yes,
know for certain if I'll see in person many of this family that we created and we built together.
right.
It was such a powerful ritual in my week of Tuesdays singing together, of the opportunity to build original songs, to connect people together that would never have a chance of connecting. And as a result, everybody has grown. We've all had a chance to develop a deeper sense of our communal body, our broader sense of who we are. And I think it's so important that um, whenever we are interacting with a population that might be different, or a person that maybe views something differently than we view, to step into that space with a sense of curiosity and wonder rather than judgment. I sometimes use a wound analogy. This is a little bit gross, but if you have a injury and that injury just keeps getting broken and broken and broken, there's no way it's going to heal. So we need similar thing with our social relationships. We need to figure out new ways, and they're not always new. They're looking at, okay, what are the harms people have experienced, and how can we heal those harms? And many of those harms are systemic. There might be generational trauma, there might be issues of economic trauma, there might be issues of abuse, substance abuse, domestic abuse, all sorts of challenges that need healing. And anytime we don't listen to learn what people need, then we're going to have some struggles. That actually reminds me of the subtitle of the book Stuart Paul Duncan and I wrote. The book's titled Music Making in U.S. Prisons. And the subtitle, which you probably can't see on the screen, but it's Listening to Incarcerated Voices. We need to be leaning on and learning and listening to people that have had lived experience in prison so we can understand what are the changes that need to happen for the greater good of society.
And I'm so glad that you also mentioned family members because everybody, you have created a family of people who gather to sing. Everybody has some form of family, whether it's family, biological family, family of origin, family of choice, which is what you're speaking to as family of choice. And so often, almost all the time, in our culture, the family members and the loved ones of people who are incarcerated are ignored, just ignored. There is virtually nothing for them. There's no programming, there's no real support except for small support groups like Cure. Iowa Cure has a support group for family members and loved ones. Living Beyond the Bars, which is an organization that I founded. That's why I founded it, is because the family members are so forgotten and often carry a lot of shame. And like you were speaking about Dan Cohen, his initial response to his mother going into the prison to sing was, "Oh my gosh, you can't do that. There are dangerous people in there. You could get killed. It's not a good environment for you." And then when he actually participated, he found out that that's not the case. That's really not the case. And society tends to, in a lot of ways, shun people or shame people who love someone who's incarcerated. And that's really where my heart is at, is with the family members and the people who care about or love someone who happens to be incarcerated. And the incarcerated person is also a member of that family. So when something happens like what happened to you and your group, the grief of that loss has got to be enormously deep for you as well as for the people who are incarcerated. And I've talked to some of the people who have family members who were in the choir, and they feel that loss too. I mean, it's a loss all around. It's a loss to individuals, it's a loss to families, and it's a loss to society in general. And I don't know that that is really understood or talked about enough in our culture. And that's part of the purpose of the series that I'm doing now, is to bring awareness and the need for healing and the need for community. So I don't know how comfortable you are talking personally about your own loss of the being able to go inside and sing, but I do want to give you the opportunity to do that if it's something that you're comfortable doing.
Absolutely, yeah. It's been incredibly difficult. Really, really, really hard. I even remember immediately after I got that message from my Kindressy, I have a meditation practice, regular twice daily transcendental meditation, where when I close my eyes to meditate, it's a clear window with what I'm feeling in my whole self, emotionally and physically both. And I had about 4 days in a row where I envision it like I write about this in this grief essay I've written. If you imagine a clear stovetop with one burner, electric burner, not gas, and it's in the middle and it's on fire. That's what it felt like in my heart. That anger is I just responded with so much anger, like, how can they not allow this back in? And then it's still, I have grieving experiences where I just like went, it's just sad. I mean, a project, if anybody here has been involved with any kind of a group that they've cared about deeply, and then all of a sudden it is gone. It's just almost impossible to imagine that. Um, so through a lot of grief, a lot of tears, a lot of conversations, I've been working to allow this to ascend to something new. I've been able to stay in touch with many of the incarcerated individuals through core links, and I've collaboratively written several articles and book chapters with people in prison. Right now, I'm finishing a book chapter on generative justice. This is a brilliant term that Fergus McNeil, Mary Cochran, and Beth Weaver have created about this idea that to make that crime is a harm against relationships, and to heal that, we need to build relationships. So it's about creating solidarity with people that have lived experience in prison in order to learn what their needs are, learn how to build that sense of care. So I'm using a lot of those ideas of generative justice in this article where we're writing about our experiences with, like Richard's experiences with volunteers in the prison and my experiences going in as a volunteer into the prison. And as you were talking, a couple things came to mind. One is this pretty powerful um, experience that a music therapist named Gloria Hartley had when she came into a concert at Oakdale, and we reference it in our book on page 27. She writes, I once heard someone describe stigma as distance. And I think where stigma exists, the space that exists in that distance is easily filled with assumptions, stereotypes, caricatures, and judgments. The Oakdale Community Choir concert closed that distance, both
Mhm.
literally, this was the first time that she had ever been inside of a prison, and figuratively, to create instead a space where connection happens.
And that's so powerfully important. Those are beautiful words. And I mean, I've never heard it said better than that. Never heard it said better. And the importance of community and of seeing people as human and recognizing that most of us could have landed in prison at some point in our lives if we happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or, I mean, some people, I could be in prison. I have a history of drug addiction, prescription drug abuse. And at one time I had three physicians. I was seeing three physicians to get the drugs that I wanted for physical. I had somatized some trauma in my life. So I was taking narcotics to kill the pain. And under the law today, I would go to prison for that, doctor shopping. I could easily go to prison. I would have gone to prison for that in the world today. So there are a lot of people who have OWIs, and there are a lot of people who have driven drunk and not got caught. There are people who have almost killed somebody. I mean, there are so many ways that you can land in prison and then be labeled for the worst thing and the worst day of your life and the most traumatic time of your life, be labeled for that forever. And there are people doing life in prison for a huge error that they made. And yes, there need to be consequences for that. I'm not sure that life imprisonment is the necessary response to a young person, 19 years old, being drunk and getting in a fight and somebody dies. I just don't see that that is an answer. I don't see that people going to prison for drug abuse and for addiction helps society or helps rehabilitate the person or does anything except line the pockets of the criminal justice system. I just don't see it as helpful. The mental health issues, all of that are just traumatic. And Brian Stevenson, who I know you really like, often says that we need to incarcerate people that we are afraid of, not people that we're mad at. And I believe that is so very true. You
There's
had
another
mentioned,
really, I was going to mention another
go
book when
ahead.
you mentioned about health issues. Dr. Christine Montrose wrote the book Waiting for an Echo, The Maddening of Mass Incarceration. She makes clear arguments that prisons make people more ill. So that's, if people aren't familiar with that, I mean, what is the value of putting a person, even back when I was in like elementary school, I remember thinking, we learn by the people we interact with. So how does it make sense to have people together in a space if we don't create the spaces within that space for growth and education and learning? Um, and and what is the real purpose of prisons? They're not working. I mean, unless you think that the purpose for prisons is to grow money for all of the many companies that earn money from incarceration. And how about looking at the 13th Amendment and in Iowa Forward 23 that
Exactly.
enslavement is legal in prisons? What about working toward minimum wage for the work that is being done? Because it's important to work. We all need a purpose in life. Is it
Well,
happening in a way that's fair?
prison in a lot of ways is the last remnant of slavery. I mean,
Hmm.
it really is.
Yeah.
And a lot of the ways that prisons are run and the way that the criminal justice system in general is run has to do with the way African Americans were treated right after slavery was abolished. So that's another topic that we'll be getting to in
Okay.
this series, but it's very, very interesting. To me, it's very, very interesting that we can enslave people who have been, and we can call them slaves, and they are property of the Bureau of Prison. They're no longer people, they are property
Mm,
of the Bureau of Prisons. I've said that before in these series that I used to, you see the shirts on people when they're incarcerated and it says property of BOP. I used to think that meant the shirt. I didn't understand that it is the person who
mm,
is property of the
mm,
Bureau of Prisons. That's
mm.
just,
That's
to
so
me,
depressing.
so tragic and traumatizing. Prison just re traumatizes or traumatizes the person who's incarcerated and also the family members.
Yeah.
And also people like you who have been, I mean,
Hmm.
the people that you have worked with. It's just a re traumatization for reasons that we don't even understand. So,
Yeah. Hey, there's a program that you might not know about called SWAN, Scaling Walls and Note at a Time. Diana Vuolo is the person who founded it, and it is a music education program for children of incarcerated individuals. And one of the students in my peace building class this spring studied it for her case study, and it's still going on. They're creating new variations of the work they're doing. So there are, it's inspiring when we hear about these kinds of programs that are creating space for healing, for connectivity, for growth, for self-expression.
is that in Iowa?
No, it's not.
No. Silly me. Of course it's not. You had also mentioned earlier that the concerts that you had done. Are any of those available if people wanted to listen to those or buy CDs of those? Are any of those available to the public?
The choir website, which is, I'll tell you how to find it. It is oakdalechoir.l as in Linda, B as in banana, .uiowa.edu. Oakdale Community Choir. It's just Oakdale Choir. And so on that website, we have on the first page are Zoom recordings from the International Music and Justice Inquiry Network. There's a link for performances. And so we have several of our past concerts available to listen to. There's a link for original works. And so not all, but many of the original pieces are there. And there's a link for press and resources. So I have on that, if you go to resources, there are several recordings of things that I've done, audio, art, information about podcasts, information about articles, all sorts of things that you can find related to this.
Awesome. That's good information to have. I very much appreciate that. And I will find a way to post that on our websites. I can't say exactly how because I'm not the techie person, but one of the people who is helping me with this will know how to do that. So I will make sure that that gets done. Um, well, I certainly appreciate your time. I know how busy you are, and I really do appreciate your time and your energy and all the work that you do, everything that you do, and everything that you've been doing. Before we close, is there anything else that you'd like to say?
Yeah, sure. I have been able to go into the Juvenile Detention Center of Lynn County. They've been welcoming music groups there, and that's another place that needs some really careful thinking. There are two organizations, one called Save the Kids from Incarceration, another one called No Kids in Prison. These are 13 to 17-year-olds in detention. The state of Iowa has some rules about the type of crime a child commits. They can go straight to an adult court. And there is just like what you had said a few moments ago, there's just a lot of problems with that. We really need to look at, and there's a like the organization Common Justice in New York, Danielle Sarid has a restorative justice program that is survivor centered and racially equitable. There are models out there of new ways of thinking about healing conflict. So I encourage anybody that's listening to this conversation to think in new ways. the University of Santa Cruz has a brilliant series called Visualizing Abolition. And the interview from October of 2020 with Gina Dent and Angela Y. Davis, they go into all sorts of creative ways of thinking about responding to the needs of community. And this conversation about abolition is not new. In 1976, Faye Honey Knopp put together the Handbook for Abolition, right when they saw there was starting to be a rise in how many people they put behind bars, and they knew prisons were not helping. So let's anybody who has any assumption about this is working here, this is just a pattern we're doing in society, let's stop. Let's think, let's talk about it, and let's listen to incarcerated voices so we can start interacting in ways that create a space of healing, caring communities, and progress.
That's wonderful. And I would add to that, not only listening to the voices of the incarcerated, but also to the loved ones and the people who are involved and care about people who are incarcerated. Their voices are needed in this conversation also. So, Redemption Songs
I
by
forgot
Andy
to say,
Douglas.
Andy Douglas
Yes.
wrote a book about his experience in the Oakdale Choir. It's subtitled, it's Redemption Songs, A Year in the Life of a Community Prison Choir. So I encourage you to check this out. Oops, there's his picture.
Yes.
Music making in U.S. prisons, listening to incarcerated voices. Miriam Kaba, We Do This Till We Free Us. Listen to a recording that is called Over Under by Lindsay Scott and Anthony Rod, available on Lindsay Scott's Bandcamp account. She recorded, that was the first partnership I created for songwriting, where she recorded Tony playing guitar, used that for the musical idea. Together they wrote the lyrics, and then she also recorded Tony saying what's hard about being in prison and uses his voice in the recording. Thank you,
Well,
Sue.
again, thank you so very much, Mary. I really, really appreciate you, and I'm sure that this will be well received by the public, and hopefully, people will get in touch with you and or with me and want to know more about this, and we'll go to the choir webpage and listen to some of the music and either further or begin their own journey into understanding more about what goes on in prison and about how we need to build community and we need to accept people and we need to encourage people and we all need some healing. So thank you very much.
Thank you,
And
Sue.
yes, and thank all of you who have tuned in to listen to this particular interview. And once again, it is a collaboration among excuse me, just a minute, among Living Beyond the Bars of Iowa, the Iowa Justice Action Network, and Iowa Cure. We do have support networks and groups for people who have or love someone who's incarcerated. And we also have a Gmail, which is Iowa Prison Perspectives, and that's IA Prison Perspectives. So thank you very much, and I will see you again soon. Take good care. Bye for now.